What's up, everybody? We want to thank you for joining us today, live and in person on the Technically Speaking radio slash TV,
Video
net,
podcast?
web, TV, whatever you want to call it. Maybe radio with visual enhancements. I think that's what we're going to stick with. But we want to thank you guys for tuning in today. My name is John Cookman, and I am going to be your host. And that right there is James Lex, your show producer.
And we're broadcasting this week live from South Dallas in the DFW Metroplex. And we're broadcasting from the SAGU studios here on the campus of Southwestern Assemblies of God University. And, John, this week's episode is brought to you by the Digital Media Arts program at SAGU.
And that's awesome. I love being connected with that program. SAGU is an extremely wonderful organization to be with. They have a commitment to advancing the kingdom of God in media technology. Lots of classes. It's a great program to be a part of. Well, today I am so excited. I mean, I've been looking forward to this show for a very long time, not just a week. And we've been prepping and planning this episode for quite a while, actually. And I went to NAB just a few weeks ago and did a lot more research. But today's theme is wireless technology in the church. Let me say it one more time. Wireless technology in the church. See, I grew up in the radio business, and at the age of 12, I was kind of under the tutelage of my brother, who is now a big radio conglomerate owner. And at the age of 12, I was sleeping and under his guardianship, I guess you would say.
You're living at the radio station?
Yeah, I was living at the radio station, a little small AM radio station, but I learned a lot of things about how radio frequencies work. And it's like magic. And I was so, as a kid back then, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a lot of things. So technologies like that were very mystical, and you could just use your imagination to see how they work. And growing up in that, I was always curious, trying to figure out, how does this stuff actually work? How do you transmit a voice or music over the air? And we have come so far in the last 30, 35 years with our understanding and the ability to help advance that, in at least in knowledge and understanding. But today, it's very exciting as well, because we're going to dive deep into this topic, but how it impacts the church in the house of worship and its place, the do's and don'ts. And we have a special guest all the way from Minnesota, Maple Grove, Minnesota. I am sure there are 20 or 25 feet of snow up there, because last time I looked at a map, I think they're north of Canada. But anyway, our special guest is the guru. He's a legend in his own time. And this guy knows so much about the landscape of technical media in the church world, but not only the church world, live production, broadcast production, and how it really integrates with what you do at a practical level. His name is Stefan Svard, and everybody give a good round of applause for Stefan. There he is. Hey, Stefan, could you turn your mic on? Unmute it. Could you unmute it? Speak, come on.
Sorry, guys. I'm just playing with you there. We have to have a little bit of fun here, don't we?
Man, you were giving me a heart attack there, man. I thought, who was I going to have to fire today? How you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. And, I got to tell you, John, I've already had to get out and cut my grass a couple times. So all the snow is melted. It is, like 70 degrees and sunny out. The trees are blooming. The flowers are in full bloom. It's beautiful here in Minnesota. And our state bird has not yet gotten out, which is the mosquito. Not the loon, it's the mosquito.
Now, I assume that you are joking around with us on that because I don't think a mosquito is a bird. So I'm going to use some deductive reasoning there. But I think I get it. And I will tell you, down here in Texas, the mosquitoes and the mosquito hawks are out in full force. And I hate it, man. I hate it. So you take your blessing and, be happy with it. Do you get a lot of mosquitoes during the summer?
Well, the mosquitoes all die with the first frost. So then we can go outside and there's no fear of getting bitten. And then I would say within the next few weeks, they're just going to come out with a fury during the summer and they hang out all summer. And then in the wintertime, they go away. I don't get how they keep coming back, though. That's
Yeah,
just the
that
thing I'm trying to figure out.
yeah. Well, that's another conversation, I guess. But that is actually an interesting question. Well, today we are going to specifically talk about wireless technology in the church, but we're going to really drill down and talk about wireless microphones, wireless in-ear monitoring systems, and then a little bit of other wireless. I mean, we could spend um, a week or two just talking exhaustively about all the knowledge that we people need to know in this one area.
Right.
But I want to hit on just a few things that growing churches are starting to ask the question, like wireless video and how that works, where the price points are, and things like that. But right now, let's just talk about wireless technology, the FCC, and where do churches get in trouble. So, what is the law? Stefan, tell us, what do you know about the law and what is it that churches need to be concerned about?
That's a great question, John. And the law, that's one of those things that has been changing over the last couple of years here. The FCC recently put out to auction, not once, but twice, a part of the frequency spectrum that is being used for our wireless microphones as well as TV stations. And what's happened, back nearly 10 years ago, the 700 megahertz band essentially went away. And today, what they've been working on is digging deeper and deeper into the 600 megahertz band. So the auction has happened and frequency bands have been sold off, but those frequency bands doesn't mean that they've been necessarily sold, across the entire country to a certain cell phone carrier or something like that. I won't get into all the details of that, but the law is the law, and I will answer that question. But before I get to that, the thing is, what frequencies are going to go away sooner? It all depends on where you live.
Yeah.
If you're in Chicago, New York, Dallas versus Kalispell, Montana, there's going to be a big difference in the demand for the bandwidth, for the cell providers and things like that. So, um, what the law states is in 2020, the frequency range from 614 up to 698 megahertz has been sold off. Now, that doesn't mean that all of that has been purchased, but it is all being reallocated. And when we hit 2020, that is when it will become illegal for churches to operate any wireless equipment in that frequency range. If we look at 614 and below, you say, well, what can we do now? Um, the frequency range that is allocated for wireless microphones and TV,
Hmm.
470 to 598 megahertz. So
Fantastic.
that is the bandwidth that we have available to us for use for both in-ear monitor wireless systems, wireless microphones in the UHF band. Now you say, well, what about 598 to 614? Well, that region there, you're going to see a lot of guard band type of stuff, as well as radio astronomy. The radio astronomy stuff, those guys need it quiet. And what I
Mm.
mean by that is they don't want us operating in that range because they're trying to talk to ET. They're trying to hear a satellite that's out at Pluto right now.
Right.
So they need us to be quiet in that range. In the guard band, you could operate wireless potentially, but I'm just not going to recommend it because their radios are going to be a lot higher powered, and there just isn't really going to be the signal space, if you will, to operate wireless microphones in that range.
Wow.
So
So that is right off the bat, that's some powerful knowledge right there. Understanding where our frequencies of operation are going to be. Let me ask you this, and some of this. I see things written or I see people talking in forums. Sometimes I even hear conversations or get to be a part of conversations. And there seems to be a lot of maybe mythology around how the spectrum works, what's available, what's not, what you can be fined for, what you can operate in. But uh, help us understand. So the most recent allocation is from 614 to 698.
698.
Okay,
Yep.
and who got that? Who you said there was an acquisition, a lease acquisition, or a buyout from the FCC. Who got that spectrum? Do you know? I heard that it was the mobile side, and is that true?
What basically happened is it's a little bit like if you think about eminent domain, where let's say you have a house on a street corner and the government decides, hey, we need to widen the street,
Mm-hmm.
and we're taking your house basically. Um, with the wireless spectrum, the FCC just took it and said, hey guys, sorry, we're taking it and we are going to sell it. And I would say, some of the big purchasers, you're going to look at like T-Mobile, Verizon, Sprint, these kind of guys. It's the providers of these things, cell phones. I mean,
Gotcha.
that's really where the bandwidth is going, because today there's more cell phones on the planet than there is people. So the
Wow.
bandwidth needed to handle that, that's why they're chewing into what we're using for wireless microphones.
Gotcha.
So essentially, the FCC or the government, took it, said,
Mhm.
"Hey, we're going to auction it off to the highest bidders." And let's just say, it's auctioned off in 25 megahertz bands.
Okay.
That's what they say. Now, a cell phone, they need a 5 megahertz band for send and then receive. So Verizon may say, hey, in certain areas, I need more bandwidth. So they may have purchased a certain bandwidth on the East Coast. But in the flyover states in the middle of the country, they may say, we don't need anything because there's not enough phones, there's not enough people there. And then on the West Coast. And it doesn't mean that Verizon bought, the same frequency band all over the country.
Oh, okay.
They could have,
Yeah.
but it's there's some geographic nature to that sell-off where you know again, I mean, Kalispell, Montana, a good friend of mine lives there. Beautiful place, but the people density is pretty low, so the need for a whole bunch of extra bandwidth there just doesn't exist.
Got you. So,
But I would say one of the things also is in some small towns, one of the government's push is to get internet access to everybody across the country.
mhm.
They want us on YouTube watching stupid cat videos and stuff, I guess, or learning. Um, but there are certain places where the distance between houses and things just are so far, and the cost to do wired infrastructure is prohibitive compared to, let's say, a couple towers that have Wi-Fi available that can cover, several square miles.
Mhm.
So it's again, I'm not going to propose to be an expert in all things wireless.
Got you.
But I do know that that is one of the things that they're looking at some of that for, is for what we call the white space or the IT related stuff.
Okay, well, that's fantastic knowledge. And you help me understand that not all things are equal. So some spaces could be a little more freer than more densely populated areas.
Sure.
And I
Yep.
guess let me do real quick before we move on. Um, that so what would happen? I have a Verizon tower actually in our backyard here on this campus,
Yep.
and um, so if I fire up in that 614 to 698 range, and they're active, what's the practical realization for me? Do I just get stepped on and my signal doesn't work, or is it um, is it just on and off? What's the practical reality of that?
Great question. And I need to give a couple answers to that.
Okay.
One is once we get to 2020, if you're operating in that band, you're
Mm,
breaking the law.
mm,
Now, uh, people speed all the time, but only a few people get caught.
mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you should do it. And when it comes to operating in that frequency range, by no means am I saying, hey, who cares? Just go ahead and keep using your mics in that range. I am not saying that. Um, but the reality is, how hard can they police it? I
Gotcha.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah, that
think
makes
about how many
sense.
square miles this country is, and
Right.
so again, let me be very clear in that the law is the law. You need to follow the law. Um, but the thing about, okay, if I've got a wireless mic and let's say it's not 2020 yet, I'm not against the law yet,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got a microphone that operates at 655, and then Verizon's up here, they've got a cell tower. Well, there may be no effect at all because, as I mentioned earlier, the cell bandwidths are 5 megahertz wide.
Mm-hmm.
So they may be at 670 to 680 between send and receive. But the reality is, if they're at 650 to 660, you're going to get completely stepped on.
Wow.
The output power of a wireless microphone, if you think about a handheld mic
Mm-hmm.
that has a AA battery or a 9 volt in it, you're lucky to put out 50 milliwatts at most as far as output power.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like if you think about a big loudspeaker and the propagation of sound. And if you plug a big, loudspeaker into the headphone jack of your cell phone or a Walkman or whatever, how loud's it going to get? You've only got a couple milliwatts
Mm-hmm.
for headphones that are right next to your ear.
Right.
It's going to work just fine. So when you think about the wireless microphone, it only has to transmit the signal 100 feet or maybe 200 feet at the most
Mm-hmm.
line of sight. So it can do that. The cell tower has to cover miles and miles. And in order to do that, it's running at much, much, much higher output power, which means you'll be completely buried. Your
Wow.
device will just
Yeah.
not work.
Yeah.
The likelihood of you really interfering with the cell tower is fairly low by comparison. But you have to think about this is a two-way communication.
Mm-hmm.
Your cell phone doesn't have a 10-watt transmitter in it.
Mm-hmm.
It has a very low power transmitter that, the cell tower has to then be very sensitive and receive that.
Got you.
So the cell can send a strong signal, but it has to be very sensitive and listen for a weak signal coming back. So that's where the concern comes in.
Okay. Man, that was good. I just every time I'm starting to embrace and understand this better. So, as I understand it, and just feel free to correct me if I am not right on this, but in 2010, FCC auctioned off the 700 sections, so from 700 to 800, and they sold that to the public safety system, I believe, or the emergency broadcast system, one of those. And um, then you had a little bit of time, so I think it was 2012 or 13, that to vacate. And now it is actually illegal to have which here on this campus, we probably had 20 plus units that were in the 700 that
Sure.
we had to uh, donate to missionaries in different countries. But the the thought is that it seems like the FCC is just whittling away at bandwidth that is freely licensed to the public, which we would be a part of that in the house of worship industry. And is there any concern that they're going to continue to whittle away at that? And if I buy a system now and it's in the I'm sorry, the 550 to
Sure.
whatever, what is that, Jay, I believe? And that channel group, and I buy that bandwidth in from Shure, Sennheiser, Audio Technica, or whatever, and then all of a sudden the FCC comes up next year and say, "Oh, guess what, guys? We're going to give this one away to whoever. It doesn't really matter." I mean, I seem to be losing all the time. But, where's there a win? How do you understand my concern for that? And what
I, I,
what are
I do,
my
John. And if I can just jump in here and
okay?
say, this last auction that just happened, I don't know how many people, if you or the other viewers or listeners have followed, but they went to market once and they didn't get enough. That, as far as buyers cost, I don't know
Hmm.
the very specific details of that, but they pulled back and went to auction again. So to me, that tells me that there was not enough demand and not enough interest in buying all that bandwidth that they actually, sort of cut back and sent it out for auction a second time around.
Got it.
So to me, what that answers is the demand, we've satisfied a lot of the demand. And with what they're taking now, I, again, this is my opinion, but I don't see us, 3, 4, 5 years from now, potentially even 10, seeing them coming back to the plate again.
Okay.
I mean, could it happen? It could, but I would just say the likelihood is really low. Again, that's my opinion,
Hmm.
but
So what's
for
happening?
yourself and for the other viewers, I mean, just
Yeah.
take a look at the auction process that just happened. It wasn't like it all sold up quickly and it was a slam dunk. Like I
Gotcha.
said, they had to go back to the table a second
Sure.
time.
Sure. So there's not a huge concern there, but let's say it does happen, or right now we are being asked to vacate a very prime spot of the 600s. And what are my options there now that I'm looking to purchase? What are my options as far as uh, getting? Are my systems just dead and I have to eat the cost, or what's out
Yeah.
there?
It's a good question, and this is something that, being a systems designer and integrator, I design and install systems for a living. Um, and I'm going to answer the question a little bit of a roundabout way here, but
Okay.
just follow me.
All right.
Is, the first system I put in 1999 as the owner of AVE is still out there and working. The speakers, the amplifiers, the whole system. So that thing's been out there, 17 coming on 18 years. We've replaced the analog mixer, we've updated the wireless. But, we're kind of coming to end of life on a lot of those components where, it's like you buy a car. Who expects a new car to last 50 years these days?
Okay.
Now, could you keep it as a classic and maintain it and have it 50 years later? Of course you could. But the normal use, you think about the product lifespan, video projectors, different things like that. We tell people all the time, you want to plan 5, 7, 10 years. Wireless microphones, I would put a little on the longer end of that, projectors a little on the shorter end of that. So if you look at history and you say, okay, it's been about 10 years, not quite, between the last auction and this one, but the point at which it goes into force and into law is 2020. So we've got a decade. So again, if you just use that
Gotcha.
logic and say,
Yeah.
if they were to do something, the likelihood of it coming quickly, I think is really low.
Hmm.
So what I would do is just, make sure that you're within that 470 to 598. Um, and buy a system. I don't know that they sell many systems today that aren't frequency agile, but
Uh-huh.
buy a system that you can adjust the frequency in. So if something does come up, or you just simply have interference from something that can be adjusted. And like I said, I mean, only the very low end systems don't do that these days.
Okay. Got it. Got it. That was good. I saw how you connected the dots there. Very good. Um, so let's jump into how some technical stuff, because this is
Sure.
technically speaking.
It
By all
is. It
means, let's get
is.
technical. I get nerdy a little bit. I got to make a shirt or something. Maybe there's already one. Um, how does wireless systems work? I have a few here on my desk, and you probably can't see that, but uh, I have a Shure and Sennheiser. I have a ULXD Q, and have Sennheiser IEM pack. But let's just go through the technical means of how this work and the signals work, and then we'll kind of dive in and talk about what makes a $300 unit as opposed to, a $3,000 unit. And when I talk about units, I'm talking per channel. So you have
Sure.
really cheap channels, or I shouldn't say cheap, but less expensive channels. And you have what we would consider in the church very budget sensitive world, um, uh, expensive channel per channel counts. So
Right.
um, let's just talk a little bit about how it works. And as you begin to describe things, I think I'll hold up a component and we might be able to get a tight shot on that. Um,
Well, it's actually, John, it's a really simple question. They work
okay.
great. That's the answer to the
Yeah.
question.
So tell us the technical term
Oh,
for
technically
transmission
speaking,
and
you want me to tell
reception.
you how they work technically. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let me. I'm going to kind of go on a path here
Okay.
and answer a few questions, but this is a miniature version of the Shure SM58.
Yeah.
This is a $100 microphone. So when you talk about, and this actually isn't a microphone, it's a USB stick, so I can plug it in, and I've got my little memory thing here.
Awesome. I
That's
got to get one
amazing.
But
of
it's just
those.
it's
I
a
gotta
fun
get
piece
one
of
of those.
swag I got. So what's the difference between a $300 and a $3,000 microphone? Well, if this piece here is $100, the difference is in the wireless section,
Okay.
right? And what does that mean? I mean, they both work, right?
Right.
Well, I need to kind of explain. I want to try and do this in simple terms so people can understand without me talking about, the intricate RF section and how that works. But if you think about the bandwidth that you have, right? Think of 470 to 598 as there's 100 lanes of traffic. We're in Los Angeles, and the 405 is 100 lanes wide. And the lower cost microphones versus the higher cost microphones, when you're in the higher end microphones, that 100 lanes can fit 100 cars wide, where the lower cost microphones, they take up the equivalent of 10 lanes.
Hmm.
So when you think of the frequency spectrum and the width of how much of the RF spectrum is used, that is one of the biggest differences between the low and the high cost microphones. If you go into a music store or something and you buy an inexpensive microphone, what's going to happen is if you use that one microphone, it's probably going to work just fine. But if you want to use 20 of them, they're going to crash into each other, and what's going to happen is you're not going to have consistent performance with that many of those microphones.
Mm-hmm.
So I use the freeway example as just kind of a visual so you can say, how many can go side by side and just the width. So it's kind of like a wide barn door versus a very narrow gate.
Got it.
So in the picture of that microphone that you're holding there,
Mm-hmm.
it has the microphone capsule, which
Yeah.
is the top part, and then the middle section is going to be your RF section, which is the transmitter, and then on the bottom section generally is going to be your batteries and your antenna.
Right.
So
Right here.
the
We're showing this, Stefan. We're showing this up close on the camera. So
okay.
as you begin to talk about it, or have been talking about it, we're showing. So the antenna, the capsule, and by the way, let me just add this in, just as a little trivia note. And I haven't really thought about it until I was prepping for this show, and I've been using this stuff for a long time. But wireless microphones are we talk about frequency agile, but let me introduce another term, capsule agile. How about
Mm-hmm.
that? Um, so I can remove this capsule from the actual wireless
body.
transmitter, the body part, and if I don't like the sound or the cardioid pattern is not working right for me. I can upgrade this, and there are many capsule manufacturers that will make for the body. In this specific case, this is a Shure body, but the other manufacturers have very similar bodies, and the capsule manufacturers will make those. So there are we can interchange this capsule and put a different sound on that, and that's a real deal, right?
Absolutely. It is, and it's like I mentioned with the SM58. That's an industry standard. It's a
Hmm.
microphone that's been around for 300 years. Um, I, I was joking, not that long. But
I
some
got
people
it.
may say, hey, I want something that sounds a little different or a little better or is better for a female vocal or this or that. And that's exactly it. Different capsules, you can get, a condenser versus a dynamic microphone, different polar patterns. But kind of digging into the wireless section of it, there is a huge differentiator today that, 5, 10 years ago, digital wireless was, it was just in its birthing stage.
Hmm.
Um, I have for my test and measurement system, when I go and do, sound system tuning and testing and measuring, I have Electrosonics digital hybrid wireless. And that is simply a receiver and a transmitter. That transmitter plugs onto any microphone I want, and it'll provide the phantom power to run even a B&K or an Earthworks or a really high-end test and measurement microphone. So the great thing about that is I can put that microphone anywhere in a building and not have to, worry about the cords and things. But that particular wireless has a completely flat and transparent frequency response, so it doesn't color the results I get on the test and measurement system. Now, that was an expensive wireless system,
Right.
but it's saved me a lot in what I do. Now, when you're looking at the different costs, analog wireless, it's like if you think back to the 50s and 60s, you had AM radio and then FM radio came in. AM radio had limited bandwidth and, there was generally more noise and things like that. Then FM radio came and it was like you got stereo sound, higher fidelity.
Right.
So there was a difference in, how those operate. And in order for an analog wireless microphone to function and offer what's called a good signal to noise ratio. Now, signal is me talking. Noise is background noise and just stuff you don't want. The wireless section of the wireless microphone, that's one of the areas of weakness, is the signal to noise ratio. So when you're dealing with an analog microphone, they put in a audio circuit called a compander, which on the microphone side compresses the audio signal.
Yep.
So instead of it being a dynamic range of maybe 80 decibels or more, it compresses it, sends it through the RF section, through the air, through the antenna, and then back to the receiver. And on the receiver end, it expands that back to, the full dynamic range, and that reduces the noise and helps the signal come through. Now, on a really low end wireless, it's not going to have a very good companding circuit. So one of the tests you can do is take a pair of keys and jingle it in front of a microphone and just see how it colors the sound, because that circuitry
Hmm.
has to try and act fast enough to do the compression and expanding. On the better analog wireless, they may have a dual channel compander that is a better sounding companding circuit. And then as we move into the digital wireless, now they're able to digitally do that compression, and you can get audio through on the other end that doesn't have any of the artifacts that come from those companding
Yeah.
circuits.
And man, you, the reality is, as I hear you talk, is that it's going to be tough to get through this. There's so much to talk about, especially on the technical end, and I want to talk about so many things.
Got a question for you. When
Okay.
Well, let me, John, let me
Hold on,
just sum it
Stefan.
up. Let me sum it up this way to
Okay.
say, if if you look at the quality difference, grab a regular. I did this test. A friend of mine down in Florida, Joey Riggins, bought a new mic, and I went down, did some sound system tuning, and there was an SM58 SM58 wireless mic on the keyboard player. Their lead singer had a different wireless SM58, but both systems were, wireless. And then another singer had a wired microphone. And I just could not get that keyboard player to sound good at all. And I'm the one running sound, and I'm like, it sounds bad.
Okay.
And again, I'm not trying to speak poorly of equipment, but I said stop. I had the whole band stop, and I took the lead singer. This gal just had lungs, man. She could let it rip. And when you think about a singer that can be quiet and really loud, I gave her the wired microphone, and it was like, sounds amazing. And then I grabbed the higher quality wireless microphone, and they're like, yeah, that sounds good. And then I grabbed the microphone that was off of the keyboard player, that was a low cost entry level microphone, and gave it to that gal, and everybody was just like, throw that thing away, because it couldn't keep up with her.
Yeah.
It muffled the sound. It didn't sound as good. Now, if you're just doing spoken word and you just need to get the message across, fine.
Right.
But if you're expecting wired performance on a low cost wireless, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Anyone that has experienced that, that is one of the. There's always going to be a give and take, and the game is full of give and takes. The more you pay for it, the better ultimate product quality you can expect, and the less you pay for it, then you now have to weigh: is the sacrifice, the takeaway, going to be worth and the money that you save? And I get it. There are just some organizations out there, they're startups, and they've got to, they're big pressure to be good stewards of the money, and they don't have much money in the bank to start with. So and everyone they're answering to the organization. So I think one of the purposes, I'm going to take a little tangent here real quick. One of the purposes of a show like this is for us to really talk this through, help expose put the light on how to understand return on investment, and how you are really being a good steward of God's money in this case. Which is a very sensitive topic in the hands of the people that are watching this. And let's shine light on really what good stewardship really means. And I
need to interrupt and just say, John,
stop it.
That may mean you have to ask the question, do you really need 12 channels of wireless?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
And to me, being a good steward means that you invest in products that are going to have a long life and meet the needs.
Right.
And I would even go so far for those listeners and viewers that have a bunch of wireless and have wired mics, do that test. Take a wired mic and take an identical wireless and just have the same person do an A/B with all the exact same settings on the mixer board.
Right.
Once you get to a certain level, once we're into the digital realm and into a quality digital system, my own tests show that it's like a wire. You can't tell a difference.
Got it. So questions are piling up and from viewers. So James, hit us with one.
Okay, this one's coming from Jay. He said, thanks for the info. Can you ask them what's the difference between frequencies and channels? Yeah, I know you guys have used both interchangeably using, can you maybe use that highway example again and just clarify frequencies versus channels? They're obviously not the same thing.
Okay, well, actually, and we had prepped this question on our show notes. And by the way, we will make all of our show notes available to you after the live session is done, so that maybe you can watch this in VOD and follow along. And we probably will not get to everything, but I did, and this is an important question. What is the difference between a channel and a frequency?
Channel starts with the letter C. Frequency starts with the letter F.
Always that Viking humor always has to come out. Come on, man.
Let me,
speak technically.
Put my sunglasses on here.
Yeah, baby.
Different manufacturers have different ways of dividing up what frequency the you know the microphone is operating in. So if you think about a TV, you change channels.
Hmm.
Channel 5, channel 4, channel 11. Well, what's that changing? It's changing the frequency. But it is a matter of, hey, I'm on channel 65 versus channel 47. That's a little easier to remember than 655.125. So it's uh, again, different manufacturers do it differently. Like the old Audio Technica 7000 series wireless had channel 1 through 99, or
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, it was, each channel was just an easy way of getting to a particular frequency where they jump at a 0.125, 0.250 point, it's just a way of moving frequencies.
Got you. Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Jay. Um, so let's try to push through, and so we can save a little bit of time on maybe some other stuff. How do you know what's the best tool or method? And think dynamically here, from houses of worship that don't have a big budget to, the moderate level, the guys that are watching us. Um, how do they know what the best frequency, or how to find the best frequency?
Well, that's a great question. And that's like asking a blind, somebody who can't see, or a blind person to describe what they see.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about what's the best frequency, we're not able to see that.
Right.
So we need to have, it's like we have to have a tool to be able to see what frequencies are, full of noise and which ones are open for us to use. A lot of wireless systems these days are starting to come with auto scanning tools, or doing a frequency scan. If you don't necessarily, as a church or an end user, need to buy your own, frequency scanning tool. That'd be like, you buying all the tools your mechanic has. Now, if you want to
Right.
be a mechanic, then you should have the tool.
Mm-hmm.
But the scanner, most quality integrators have got scanners where they can come out and do a frequency scan of your space. Like for you, John, you've got that cell tower.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to come out, or someone else want to come out with a scanner and take a look and say, hey, you know what? They're operating here in this frequency range. Down here, it's totally clear.
Yeah.
So let's operate down here. If you don't have the luxury of doing that, and if you don't have a wireless microphone that has built-in, frequency testing, then you just have to, you have to guess.
Do the
But
work.
the thing is there's actually tools that can help
Okay.
in that guesswork.
What are those
Because if
tools?
you go on to, whether it's Shure, Audio Technica, the various manufacturers have tools on their websites where you can type in your zip code, and based on the zip code, they will have a list of TV stations in operation, and they know what frequencies they operate at. So then you will get the feedback from that web tool, what frequencies are going to potentially be free of other noise.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to be aware, if you're like, a lot of drugstores, there's churches on every corner. If a church across the street has got some wireless mics, it might not be a bad idea to coordinate with them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they're 3 blocks down the road, you really don't have to worry, unless they're operating some, crazy illegal wireless that's super powerful, but that wouldn't make any sense for a church to do. So the online tools for, checking based on your zip code, what TV channels are in use. Otherwise, get a frequency scanner out there and just check.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. And I've seen some frequency scanners on mobile devices. They're usually going to be in the upper frequencies, but there are ways. There are also, you just got to consider what um, device you're buying and where those frequencies are. That is part of the scalable price. If you are wanting to know whether you should buy a $300 mic or invest in $1,000 per channel. And when I say $300 mic, I mean a system, a wireless system. You're not going to get those amenities per se, like the scanner built in, and the industry that we're in is much like uh, the car industry or any other electronics industry. They introduce a technology, they'll put it in their best flagship model, fly that flag for a little while. It'll be very expensive, and then they'll come up with a newer technology, pass the technologies down to their as they become pervasive, and it'll trickle into some of the mid-range because when Sync first came out, Sync was in most of the manufacturers' top models, and you were paying a lot of money to get that instant sync. And then I didn't say in sync, the instant sync, and then a few years later, you notice that in some of the lower to mid-grade models, and you're able to do this for half the cost. Well, that ultimately will happen, but if you're trying to get the best experience and the best quality, you, especially integrators like you and guys like me that have been just doing it forever from experience, you get what you pay for. And that's not some snobby remark about how things work. It's just the reality is that you can expect if you're going to pay a lower price for a product that in the grand scheme of things does the same thing. It's wireless technology. The cheaper or the less expensive product is not going to have all the amenities and all the bells and whistles, such as scanning abilities. It's not going to come with the best capsules. For instance, here's an example. And I actually like. I don't. I, I'm not a brand snob per se. Some people are, and that's fine. That's if you're so loyal to your brand. There's some commendability in loyalty, I guess. But I like to be open-minded at least and look at different products because there's an ebb and flow through manufacturers. But a Shure mic or a system like this, in you were to do an apples to apples kind of cost comparison, there's not going to be a whole lot of difference. But in the technologies that are handed down, for instance, the new digital technologies that are starting to use the upper frequencies, the very, very, very high frequencies, such as wireless or the Wi-Fi G range, the 2.1 to 2.8 gigahertz range. Well, Audio-Technica was really displaying at NAB this year. It's not a brand new product, but it's one of their newer products, the System 10. And it's a channel hopper, which is a different idea than what normal analog frequency specific technology is using. Now you're using they're pocketing frequencies and changing them often to ensure that you have a nice, robust, solid flavor. But one of the things I noticed about, and it was cheaper per dollar, per channel, was that the actual transmitter itself was not nearly as good as, say, this one or maybe a mid-level Shure or Sennheiser. Those things are solid. And what that meant was when I grabbed it and I do that, or I touch this at all, it's going to have a lot of noise in the signal, and you're going to get that's unwanted noise. And they didn't perfect the body, or they did. I shouldn't say perfect the body, but they didn't make the body as solid as it needed to be. So you had to go up the next model to get a better transmitter body that would reduce the hand noise, that so it wouldn't be transmitted through the so it's little things in the details
Right.
that you're going to get when you pay more for your system. And it's very easy. You go to a lot of online sites and see how the systems are divided up. You can buy a system, or you can go grab a transmitter and buy a transmitter or a receiver, and take a really good look, do good investigation. Stefan, how does one start the process of investigating what the right mic is for them. We're going to kind of end on this, and I know that's a very loaded question, but see if you can simplify that for the mid-level, mid-budget churches that are out there, the low-budget churches that just don't allocate a whole lot of money for media. How are they going to get the best bang for the buck?
I'm going to answer that question, John, but you got to first answer for me how much time we have, because I've got a few topics that are super critical to
Yeah.
try and cover.
Well, we can do whatever we need to do as long as you want to stay on. We'll do that. But
Okay.
10 minutes is our show time. But what
Yep.
we can do, we'll stay live and go to that. But the VOD will just cut it back in.
Okay. So I'm going to go quickly here, but there's a
Yeah.
few things I need to address because you did mention about the 2 gigahertz range. Couple things, and I'm going to go fast, so just try and follow me here, and I will answer that value question.
Okay.
There is the 2.4 gigahertz range stuff. People say, hey, if I'm operating up there, we should be completely safe of this FCC stuff. Sure, but how much other stuff is there in that range? There's a huge amount of stuff in the, I'll call it the Wi-Fi band.
Yeah. That's what it is.
Audio-Technica System 10, I think it's a very creative system. But there's something that I think the viewers and listeners need to understand, and that is the propagation of RF. It's a bit like the propagation of sound. If you hear somebody rolling down the street with a big sound system in their car and they're playing, Sir Mix-a-Lot or, whatever.
Nice.
Pick your favorite rap artist. What do you hear first?
The bass.
You hear the bass frequencies. The treble frequencies are much more, sort of directional because they're very short wavelength. So in the 2.4 gigahertz range, your range is very much line of sight by compared to the 500 megahertz range. And the part of the reason they can get the cost down there is think about the millions and billions of Wi-Fi devices on the market. So the money invested in the R&D of the radio frequency section is not just Audio-Technica's money they're spending, but Cisco and Ubiquiti and all these companies that are making RF devices for Wi-Fi. That investment is in some ways, not completely, but in some ways pulled over into the wireless microphone space. It's not something that I'm a huge fan of because antenna distribution is not really an option for that. The antennas are built in, and if you want to remote the antenna out, you literally mount the box out on a wall, and you need to mount each one. You can't combine all the antennas together. So it is a viable option. It is fairly low cost for what you get. But when you're talking about getting back into the traditional UHF frequency range, the 470 to 598, one of the things about performance of systems is the antennas. Now, if people take a wireless mic that has a couple rubber ducky antennas on the back and just put a cable on that and say, hey, I'm going to put the receiver by my soundboard and then put a 50-foot cable and hang the antenna, off somewhere, you're actually going to lose RF performance because the loss through the cable in many cases is more than the loss through line of sight through the air.
Okay.
And if you're going to put a little antenna out on the end of a cable, it has to have a ground plane. So that means like a paddle type antenna has a ground plane built into it. Or if you purchase, like the antenna that has the spiral, there are certain types of antennas that have a ground plane. It's kind of like a plus and a minus on a battery.
Right.
The rubber ducky antenna that's on your wireless, rack mount unit,
the quarter pole,
the ground plane is the chassis. It is the cabinet of that wireless. So if you take the antenna and remote it, it's not going to work well.
Listen up, kids. This is heavy wireless physics right here. We're talking.
Again,
it's good. It's really good stuff.
Going fast, but these are important topics. And if you look at, hey, I've got an amplified antenna versus a paddle or a high gain antenna, there's a distinct difference between just simply an amplifier and a high gain antenna. It's kind of like an amplifier. All it does is it takes the signal that the antenna has already pulled in and then just turns it up. Now, if there's a lot of noise, it's also going to amplify the noise. But a high gain antenna is a bit like doing this. It is directing where I'm watching for or picking up that signal from. So if you buy paddle style antennas or the one with that coil that looks like a snout, they are very directive. Just like a microphone, if you speak directly into a microphone versus the side or the back, it's picking up from a particular direction. And if those antennas are pointed at where your wireless transmitters are, it's going to get better signal from those and less noise. So if you've got a long cable run from your antenna to your wireless receiver, that's where you need an amplifier. But in any case, I really like to see the cable from the antenna to the wireless systems be shorter than longer. So now answering your question of value, how do I choose one? And John, you hit on something that was really important, and it was handling noise.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that most people don't even know to consider. But it is when you grab the microphone and you just touch the body of it, how much of that gets transmitted into the capsule and then amplified.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the mic's going to sit on the stand all the time,
No
okay.
biggie.
But if you're going to be up there clapping, how many worship directors are trying to clap when they're holding the microphone and you hear dunk, 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 versus it being quiet? The higher end microphones are going to be much more immune to that handling noise and can handle that kind of stuff better. The same is true with like a headset or a lapel mic. Different qualities of microphones, you can just touch the cable and it'll tunk, 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 tunk. You'll hear that in the microphone. So the question of value is you really have to try it, or you have to talk to somebody that has experience and can help you in that decision-making process. To just look online and say, hey, these ones are on sale, let's buy these because I can afford 6 of them. That's kind of like buying a car without ever driving it and knowing if it can tow the trailer you want to tow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I tell that story all the time about, do you need a really big 3/4 ton truck with a diesel engine or a little S10 with a 4-cylinder?
Mm-hmm.
Depends on what you're going to do with it.
Yeah.
So the question of value is either you've got to research it yourself or you've got to talk to somebody that can understand your DNA as a church, who you are, what your needs are, and then help position you guys into, the right options.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That is very, very solid knowledge and advice. And we put up your lower third. I'm sure people would want to get in contact with you. You seem to be a nice guy, even though
Yeah, you should
you
see me on
you
Saturday.
you kind of you look weird. I'm just kidding. Um, uh, are you a Viking? Is it true?
Who's Vikings? Who's that? What? No,
um,
actually, my
any,
father was born in Sweden,
wow.
so I think I'm a Viking with my blood. So
Yeah, sure. Um, well, everybody in Minnesota is from Sweden, right? Or some
there's some
Norlandic.
from Norway.
Yeah,
They're in
yeah. But it's
that's
still
okay.
you all put hair on your face, I guess. It's not just you're not just a hipster. You're for real. Anyway, that was fantastic, and we've been putting up your get in touch with me on the lower third there, but we didn't talk about you've owned your own company for 19 years,
Yep.
AVE, Audio Video Electronics, and this is tell us a little bit more. You'll do a better job than me just stumbling around on it. I know you're an integrator, but you also resell products. What is it that you do as an integrator that is beneficial to a church?
Let me answer that as quickly as I can because I know we're running short on time for the video here. But
Okay.
at age 13, I started running sound for my church youth group, and back then it was the Mullets, the Marshall amp stack, and DeGarmo and Key type of music,
Yeah.
Petra. Um, from there, I graduated high school, and it was that big question of what do I want to be when I grow up? And it was doctor, nah, lawyer, no, sound guy, yeah, sound guy,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
So I went to college, got my education, really my background in audio and acoustics. I did everything from, studio recording to, ease modeling and all that kind of stuff. Got an internship at a small company. We fixed TVs and VCRs and reel-to-reel decks and installed the occasional sound system. and that was my passion. So I worked there for a while, just kind of saw that, hey, things are only going to go so far here. Went back to college a second time for, more business education. And as I left college a second time, I got married, bought the house, and oh, by the way, I bought the business I was once the intern at. That was 19 years ago. Worked out of my house for, year and a half, and it just got to the point where we grew so big, we moved to a commercial space. And today, our main focus is doing the design work on the front end, and then doing the full build or integration of the system. And we're working on projects all over the country. I'm doing Lifeway Christian Bookstores headquarters in Nashville.
Oh, wow.
Got several projects in Texas and Florida, and plenty here in Minnesota as well. But um, our main focus is to make sure we love to be in right away when a church is looking at building a new building, or starting a remodel project, working with the architect to make sure we get the acoustics right and design in all the infrastructure for the sound and video and lighting. Even if the money's not there to put all the stuff in right away, we get the design so it's prepared for that as they get the money to grow into it. So yeah, we do the whole thing. We sell equipment, but really our main focus is putting in systems and kind of doing that big picture. So that's what we love to do, and we've got a great team here that I get to work with every day.
That's awesome, man. And I'll tell you, one of the ways that we came in contact was through the internet and on Facebook. There are a lot of great communities for church media techs and church media leaders. And before I knew that you were an integrator or you were a reseller of any type, and just to be clear, I want everybody to know that in full disclosure, Stefan and I have never done business together. So, and I have asked him some questions, and I messaged him, and he got back to me immediately. I sent him a video of our room, one of our venues here, and just trying to pick his brain about a particular light. I don't know if you even remember that, but he didn't know me, and he got right back with me, and that impressed me. And we do a lot of our own integration. We have a huge team here. So our need is a little different than maybe most of the house of worships out there, but there is an idea out there, the whole do-it-yourself concept.
Yep.
Well, you can get really lost quick and make big blunders and not be the best steward of the money, even though your heart's in the right place and you're trying to do it the right way. But with this is a industry that requires technical expertise, and it behooves me as well. And I've been doing this for over 35 years, but even the new guys don't think you can't benefit from an outside opinion and someone that sees these issues, especially in your niche, in this niche, the church, all the time. So reach out, develop a circle of influence, a network of friends, and you never know when you're going to need Stefan's services or anyone that might be close that you're in relationship, but always use them as a sounding board to get good, solid advice first. And then I'm sure through that relationship, they're going to do right by you because they understand first the kingdom work that you're doing. Secondly, they understand that our industry just is not we don't have money trees growing in the backyard. So they truly are trying to get you the best bang for the buck. So they understand where you are. And my disclosure is we haven't done any business, but I asked you to be on here because I saw you had a great reputation. You were giving great advice to other people asking questions, and there just wasn't an air of arrogance about you out there. So that meant a lot to me, and it really meant a lot to me when I sent you a video just through private message, and you responded so quickly. And I know, man, you have a thriving business. Your time is very valuable, very, very valuable. So those kind of things mean a lot, and I just want to champion that and say he's not on here by accident. He earned his way to this, and he's doing a great job. There's a lot of other people that will speak highly and positively about his service. But I wanted to grab a hold of the forums, the Facebook forums. Well, one of the largest church technical media forums is called Church Sound and Media Techs, and there are almost 28,000 people in that group.
I
So
think it's almost 29,000
oh my,
now.
it's probably growing
Yeah.
as I'm my long-winded diatribe here. But the fact of the case is it's a resource of just experience and guys that are experiencing in real time problems, issues, and successes. This is a great way for you to reach out, be a part. And you might see on the screen now, James is combing through some of the threads. There are thousands of threads a day, and I guarantee one of those threads will impact you. But we're a part of that and several groups that are out there. But I wanted to mention that you heard me talk last week about the NAB, but and then Infocom coming up and LDI, but there is a more of a grassroots movement of connection for the niche that we're in, and the forum of Church Sound and Media Techs. It's based. David Jordan is the administrator there. He's based in the Orlando area. Specifically Kissimmee, where home of Disney World. I actually used to work there, and so I know Kissimmee, the hole in the ground out there. It's not anymore, but it used to be way back then. And they're doing a great job, but they're trying to build a network of guys. They have a conference going on June 9th and 10th of this year, and you're going to meet a lot of guys. If you're in that local area, you're listening, it would behoove you to at least inquire, reach out to CSMT on their forum and ask more questions. It's just $25 to register, and you'll get some good lessons and some seminar type speakers, and there'll be a few maybe integrators or manufacturers there, but more than anything, you're going to connect to guys that are experiencing the same thing that you're experiencing, and that's very important. Get in a network of like-minded people. Iron sharpens iron. That's a biblical principle that we preach a lot here. And start the conversation. Reach out. There's a lot of introverts in our world. They're not all like you and I, Stefan, and just crazy goons out there. But most guys are introverted. You get out of that. Reach your hand out. Start shaking hands. Be a part, because you never know what church down the road is experiencing the same issues that you are, or maybe you've overcome and you can share that with them. This community needs more awareness and more knowledge and understanding from your experience, our experience. And that's one reason we're doing this show like we're doing. We want to be a resource and a help to God's kingdom, but those that are in the same industry, that we're using the same tools, and our passions run deep. Man, they're like our blood. They're a part of who we are, and I'm very, very passionate about this, and I know Stefan is as well. We wouldn't take the time to do this. I could be eating right now with my family, but my family knows. Matter of fact, a great story here is my son is actually doing the switch today for the show, and he's 13. I'm bringing him up the way my brother brought me up, and it's such a deeply connected organization of people that I think you're missing out if you don't reach out and connect with guys. Yes, connect with Stefan and I, and we might have a little more experience right now, but if you keep growing, you're going to have that same experience, and you're going to be able to offer that leadership and that guidance in the future. So learn wisely, take your knowledge higher, but get understanding. Don't just read a book and think you know everything. Knowledge is a little bit deadly if you just have knowledge. You need understanding, which leads to wisdom. So hang out with guys like Stefan and uh, find guys that have been around, and we have contacts that you could reach out to as well, not just us, but you were telling me, I think we'll do a part 2 of this sometime in the near future. You could bring the guy from Electrosonics on, and man, an engineer mind that could speak directly to us, and it would be valuable. So we have contacts and connections we can make available to you, not just on the show, but maybe in email and maybe on the forums. But that's just kind of my 2 cents there. I want you to hit on one thing that we'll wrap up with this as far as the tech goes. You told me something very interesting to me, how wireless frequencies get affected by LED panels and light frequencies. Can you we'll do another show and we'll talk about it more exhaustively, but this was important and I find it highly interesting.
Yes,
Give
I'm
me
going to grab one
okay,
tool.
yeah, good. He's going to go grab one of his tools. This is very cool.
All right,
go for it.
So, John, first, I need to respond to your comments and just say thank you for bringing me on the show. I count it as an honor to be able to share my knowledge. So thank you for that. And I need to say super briefly about, if there's people that want help or knowledge or whatever, I'm on, the Church Sound Media Tech group. I'm on Visual Church Media, Behind the Mixer. There's a lot of different groups. I actually taught at the CSMT conference last year.
Oh, man.
This year, my wife and I are expecting, so it's not something that I don't know that I'm going to make it this year to the conference. But it is really, I'll say, well suited for those local to that area to be a part of. So
awesome.
With that, yes, one of the big trends that's happening in a lot of churches today is they are going and saying, hey, we don't want a projector and screen anymore. We want to do this LED wall, which I've installed quite a few of them, and I have a lot of knowledge. I've actually been over to Hong Kong, over to China, and done research. And, we've got a system that has been customized for us. But one of the issues, it's not the light, but it is the electronic circuitry within that LED panel that creates and emits RF frequencies. So essentially it's noise. And what I have right here, this is an AM radio. It's Heathkit, if any of you guys are old enough to remember. I think I was about 7 years old when I built this radio. And if I just turn this thing on, and I have out here, there's nothing. There's barely any static. And as I bring it close, look what happens when I get close to my computer monitor.
Yeah,
and
man.
That is just picking up and showing the RF noise. Now, this radio is tuned to a frequency, but there was such an overpowering amount of RF emission from the screen on my computer that it picked it up as audible noise. So there are a lot of things, and that goes back to that question earlier of what frequency should I pick?
Yeah.
Well, something like an LED screen like that, if not properly engineered with all the shielding, then it's going to emit a lot of noise. But for example, the panels that we bring in, they've all been tested and meet the FCC specification. So they still emit some noise, but nothing compared to, the radio out here would be loud and full of noise as it would up close. So just to be aware that, again, you get what you pay for. And these LED panels are not inexpensive. So it's something that people are like, hey, I can go get this random brand or that random brand, and it's cheaper than, maybe what Stefan has or somebody else. There's a reason.
Right.
And I've been in situations where I've seen people spend $100,000+ on something, and now their wireless mics don't work. Turn the LED screen off, and now they work again.
Wow.
So there's a lot more I could go into,
Yeah,
but I
we're
know we're
definitely going to have to do a part two with this and
part
bring
two.
in some engineers. We had a Sure engineer scheduled for today as well, but Sure decided to send him off to another land, and he couldn't get back in time. But this is worthy of more conversation. And Stefan, I can't thank you enough for taking the time, your valuable time, to be a part of technically speaking, but in a bigger idea of the kingdom work and helping all of us understand better how things work and giving us the opportunity to make better, more informed decisions.
Yep.
And it's I just know that we're going to have you on. We're going to ask you at least to be on more, just not in this. You have a wide real estate of knowledge in this area of media, technical media, especially for the church. Oh, I didn't mention that one of the special connections we have is that you do a lot of church work. You were raised in the church doing that. You're a part of the Living Word Christian Center, and I assume that's in Maple Grove or in that area.
Yeah, they're in Brooklyn Park, a neighboring city.
Yeah, and so you're not just you have tons of church work experience. So
Right. Yep.
you know exactly what's going on, and oh wow, our license the light bill has not been paid. We just or God's telling us to hang it up, but it's time to end. Folks, we really, really appreciate you tuning in with us this week. If you have any comments, suggestions, or questions, please leave them in the comment or the chat section of YouTube or Facebook, and reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you and talk to you. But until next time, next Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, we go live again. Until then, may God go with you and bless you in all that you do. Thank you and have a great night.
Good night, everybody.